The biggest issues for the election are the three best reasons to return the Morrison government. They are, in no particular order, the economy and jobs, standing up to China, and a real fear of what the Greens would do if they had just 1 degree more power, let alone what they are demanding. Now let's deal with the economy and jobs. This was the test that the Labor Party set for the government about whether or not the economy was doing well by the time of the election.
Shouldn't the government's priority have been actually securing the recovery instead of claiming credit for it prematurely with taxpayer-funded marketing and spin that had to be canned?
Well, he's also gone on to say that jobs. If jobs improve, then that is the sign of the success when it comes to the government, the country, and most importantly, the economy. Well, today we got numbers that you didn't hear about on the 6 p.m. news because they are good for Australia. And good for Australia means good for the government, so therefore no one's allowed to talk about it. The unemployment rate is down to its equal 13-year low. It's on its way towards having a 3 in front of it. That would be the first time in 50 years. Have a look at those numbers. You can see where the height was at the first, and then again with the second waves of Delta. You can see Omicron, but then you can see what has happened since. Also, in terms of the number of people who actually have a job, the people who have been advantaged by the policies to save the economy, like JobKeeper. JobKeeper saved Australia. It saved the economy, and I believe it saved people's lives because jobs saves lives. Well, again, as you saw there, the statistics are very clear that the number of people that are employed is more than ever before in the history of Australia ever. At the start of the pandemic, 12.9 million people had a job, and then as it started to bite, it was 12.1. It came back to 12.8, but today it is 13,255,000 people that have a job in Australia. That is a magnificent recovery that Australia has gone through. To put it nice and simply, 1.1 million jobs have been created since the worst of the pandemic. That doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by endless spending. Remember, Labor wanted to keep JobKeeper but then voted to get rid of JobKeeper, then whinged about JobKeeper not being there because apparently the unemployment queues would be longer than ever. But the reality is it had to happen so that people would go back into the workforce and people would start having more people working for them. 1.1 million people are back in work. They can't hide, they can't muck around. That's why they don't talk about it. It's why the media will not trumpet this recovery, because they know it's good news for the country, and good news for the country means good news for the government. For his part, the Prime Minister knows that above everything else, his job is to make sure you have one.
And on a day, Mr Speaker, when we can say in this country that youth unemployment is at 9%, that's my job, Mr Speaker, keeping Australians in jobs. And under this government and our economic policies, Mr Speaker, more than 1 million women are in work today that weren't in work under the Labor Party, Mr Speaker. Youth unemployment is at one of the lowest levels we've seen for more than a decade, Mr Speaker. Women's unemployment is at 4%. You've got to go back to the 70s, Mr Speaker, when they started doing records on those issues. That's my job, Mr Speaker, to get Australians into work, to ensure that they have the hope of a stronger future because they're living in a strong economy that's getting stronger as we come out of this pandemic.
And what ruins jobs? Taxes. And each way Albo's record speaks for itself.
But, Mr Speaker, the Shadow Treasurer couldn't answer it that way, because we know the Labor Party and the Labor leader in particular, Mr Speaker, has always been for higher taxes, as the Treasurer has been reminding that House. He's been for a mining tax. He's been for a carbon tax. He's been for a congestion tax. He's been for a retirees tax. He's been for inheritance taxes, Mr Speaker.
All true. All the reality. This bloke is trying to pull off a Biden. I'm going to pretend to be super moderate, but the reality is you know where his heart lies. You know where his shadow cabinet will go. You know what they said was absolutely right when they thought they could get it under the radar at the last election. But despite the fact that, as I said, 1.1 million people are back in a job, more people have a job in Australia than ever before in the history of the country. What was the headline in The Guardian today? Well, apparently the bad news is that there's lots of job vacancies, particularly in regional Australia. Last time I checked, a good thing, because there are jobs for people who want a job on top of the 13 million who already have one.